We are looking at ID notes on microscopic cells and organisms today. We have a supplemental website called eClinPath. This is going to be great for those of you that are pursuing a career in medicine. It's got a lot of different information on the different cells that you're going to see if you're interested in pathology or you're interested in the cellular aspects of things. We also have IDEX Learning Center. IDEX is one of the companies that we do send out for lab analysis. So some great resources for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started into our Quizlet set. But before we do, I want to set up my notebook. So I've got ID notes, microscopic cells and organisms on the left. I'm in Cornell style. I've got the name of the organisms to the left-hand side. And then my characteristic of the cell or organism, as well as a drawing. That drawing is going to be really important for us with this to be able to distinguish the different types of cells, because some of them are just going to be slightly different. It's going to be really hard to tell the difference for some of them. So make sure that you definitely draw your pictures for these. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. The first cell we're going to look at is Struvite crystals. Now these are going to be found more in a urinalysis. So when we're looking at the first few sets of cells, we're looking, or organs, these are crystals. They are going to be from urinalysis. So Struvite crystals, they're also known as triple magnesium phosphates. That's what they're made out of. So you end up having Struvite crystals when your urine is too basic and concentrated. So not basic as in, oh my gosh, that's so basic, but basic as in it's a base, right? When we talk about the pH scale, and it's highly concentrated, often a result of inflammation in the urinary tract. So Struvite crystals are going to be a good indication if there is an infection in your urinary tract, because things are going to be inflamed. So here we have their rectangular with the little crystal lines in them. Next, we have calcium oxalate crystals, which is another very common crystal you're going to find in urinalysis. So there we have the urine is high in calcium and citrates or oxalates and is acidic, predisposes a pet to developing crystals. So if the urine is high in calcium, citrates, oxalates, and is acidic, that is what's going to cause those crystals to form. And these, again, calcium oxalate, they're going to be little squares with your X pattern or that diamond crystal form right there. So those are your calcium oxalate crystals. So this is for acidic urine, where the Struvite crystals, which are rectangular, are for more basic urine. Next, we're going to look at epithelial cells that we'll find in the urine. So we will have cells that slough off in our urine because of our cell renewal from all of the different organs that are part of our urinary tract system. So the epithelial cells are skin cells that cover the outside of the body and line the internal surfaces of organs. So all of your skin, this is all epithelial cells, and they are also in your organ lining as well. So we do refresh, renew, rejuvenate these cells so they will slough off in the urine. And here we have, these are epithelial cells that you'll find in the urine. They will all look different too, depending on where they're from, but it's this cluster of cells. So there's one with the little nuclei, there's another there, here, and there. This is just debris, so that is not the epithelial cells. Your epithelial cells are right up here. Next, we're going to talk about bacteria. So there's two main shapes of bacteria that we're going to pay attention to. The first main shape is cocci or cocci, and this is a spherical shaped bacteria. So cocci is your spherical shaped bacteria. I like to think about the C's and the O's as very circular, so it helps me remember that that is what that's going to look like. So here we have clusters of cocci bacteria, all of these little circles. Next, we have Bacillus or rod-shaped bacteria. I remember that with the parallel L's or the double L's, so I think of rod shapes because of the L's in Bacillus. So here we have the rod-shaped bacteria. So here is multiple side by side. So here's the rod-shaped bacteria, Bacillus. And those we can find in ear smears, often different types of smears as well. And then we have our yeast. This yeast that we're going to show you is common in ear cytologies, or more often seen in ear cytologies. So we have single-celled fungi, right? So yeast is a fungus, often infecting the ears. And here we have, it's a little bit more difficult to see, but they have a slight, little slight snow person or peanut kind of shape. So you have a little circle that tapers off with a larger circle. So that is yeast. They look very similar to bacteria, and it is easy to get them confused. But you just want to look at they're a little pinched or tapered in to the center, or they look like little feet, some people will say. So that is yeast. Now we're going to go into the blood cells that we'll find in our microscopic examination. So leukocytes are white blood cells. So leukocytes talk about the group of white blood cells. White blood cells are going to protect the body against invasion of foreign material, remove dead cells and other waste from our body. So the white blood cells are what we think about with immune responses. There's 5 different types of white blood cells, 5 major categories. We're just going to look at 2 for our identification notes. The first is eosinophils. And these are granulated, disease-fighting white blood cells, so allergic reactions and things of that nature. So granulated means that they're going to have speckles inside of their cytoplasm, and we'll talk more about that as we continue with the year. So here is an eosinophil. We can see all that speckling within that cell. Next is a neutrophil. Neutrophils are your most common of your white blood cells, and these are a type of white blood cell that is going to engulf invading microbes or foreign material, and they contribute to the nonspecific defenses of the body against disease. So a neutrophil is your first line of defense. Think of it as your infantry. So they are going to engulf other cells. They look very similar to eosinophils, but they do not have a speckled cytoplasm. So all of these are neutrophils. So they're going to have a clear cytoplasm, and then either a kind of dumbbell shape or a curved nuclei. Next, we have our thrombocytes. Thrombocytes are platelets, and those are responsible for clotting. So here we have a few, these little itty bitty purple dots is what they tend to show up as on your microscope slides. Platelets help form blood clots and slow or stop that bleeding. So if we have diseases with blood clotting, then generally our platelet count is off. So we will make sure that we count those platelets when we do what's called a blood smear. And we'll look at those things. So those are our thrombocytes. The last is our erythrocyte, or our red blood cell. So erythrocyte are red blood cells, and for us, they are responsible for carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the circulatory system. So I bring the oxygen to the cells that need it, and then I pick up the carbon dioxide and I release it out the system. So that is your erythrocytes, or your red blood cells. Something that is interesting to note, and we'll talk more about this later. So here's a whole bunch of different red blood cells kind of stacked on top of each other. This is 1 million red blood cells. And I know this because they're spherical. So when we go further into blood, we'll talk about how non-mammals will actually have ovular blood cells. So mammals are spherical or circular in shape, and they do not have a nucleus. So these are mammalian blood cells, or red blood cells, which is kind of interesting. So that is your microscopic ID and identification.